Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. A big welcome to episode 62 of Redefining Midlife. You know, one of the things that I most love about each passing year would have to be the amazing people who will come into my life for the very first time. Today, I'll introduce you to Ames Watts, a very special lady who's come into my world only this year. You'll soon pick up in our chat that Ames is a woman who is both incredibly talented, yet very modest about her achievements in life, and I learned more of these during our conversation. Ames is a self-confessed introvert, but she has proven to herself so many times that pushing herself out of her comfort zone has allowed her to peel away the layers of who she was expected to be. Now, for many years, Ames had a key role in humanitarian projects around the world for the United Nations until she became a mother. And it was her love of sewing and her unique style that allowed her to hold on to her identity that was separate to being just mum. And this has led Ames down an incredible road of creating a business around her passion. Now, Ames has created a community for sewists to gather and to connect over a shared passion. And she's dedicated to helping sewists dive deeper into their creativity, bring more joy to their days, and just see those ripple effects in the rest of their lives. That's something to be celebrated. I just love it. Indy Bindy is where you'll find her fabric store that specialises in independent designer fabrics from Japan and the Indy Bindy Sewciety. I know you're going to love Ames. So without further ado, let's welcome her to the show. Welcome, Ames, to the Redefining Midlife podcast. It's so good to have you on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
There's lots and lots we're going to be able to talk about today because there's parts of you that, well, I say parts of you, there's a lot about you that I don't know because we're only fairly recently met. And this is an opportunity for me to be a sticky beak and ask you some good questions and learn more about you. But it's also a great opportunity for you to show the other women who are listening just what you've done with your life and how you've been able to change and meld it and create something that is, you know, still evolving as it should always, but yeah, just such a great story. Can't wait to talk more.
Thank you. I'm happy to chat about any and everything. So
Good. Oh, she's an open book, everybody. Look out. Yeah. Ames as we've never seen before.
oh dear.
Yeah, because you really, the more I learn about you, the more amazing that you become in my eyes. And sometimes we don't take, you know, we take our own life and what we've achieved for granted. And it's always, I just want to highlight and tell you now and throughout the show just how amazing you are and what incredible inspiration that you are for me. And I think for other women who are going to listen to this podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jo. That really does mean a lot coming from you.
Thank you too. Okay, so Ames, now we're going to go back to your early years. So we'll learn a little bit more about you because this is a side of you I don't know. Where did you grow up and how was life for you when you were a young girl?
I actually grew up where I am right now, which is in Canberra, Australia. And I had a beautiful childhood. It was full of family and friends and freedom and fun. It was perhaps a little different, or perhaps it was shaped by my cultural background as well, because my mum is an immigrant from Vietnam. So she came across at the end of the Vietnam War, just when Saigon collapsed, with my dad, and she moved to Tasmania. She was one of the few Vietnamese people in Tasmania. And so my childhood was shaped by one, the Asian culture, but also my mother's experience coming to Australia and wanting to kind of fit in and assimilate. And so my childhood kind of had the filter of, it was very important how people perceived us and that it was all about kind of community and fitting in with your community, and that kind of lens was a big part of it as well.
And does your mum talk, or did she talk much about her life back in Vietnam when you were growing up?
Yeah, she did. Yep. And Dad spent about 10 years there when he went over and met her. So they talk about a lot about their life before me
Yeah.
as well, and all the fantastic stories that are there. So yeah, it's interesting because I never really actually thought of it as different and just kind of who we were.
Yeah.
But growing up in Australia, I often got questions about, oh, where are you from, or what's your background, or that kind of thing. And so then I realized that there's something else there to me, and so I'd have to explain. And then whenever I went to Vietnam, they would also ask like where I
Oh,
was
of
from and
course.
perceive me as being foreign
Yeah.
because I don't look like either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
so.
hard, isn't it? Because you kind of got a foot in each camp. And and when you're growing up as a child, that would be quite challenging at times, I could imagine.
It was when I started to be aware of it, I think, when
Yeah,
the
yeah,
questions started. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And how did you
Mm.
handle those? Were you just upfront and address them, or were you try to brush them away? What did you do?
Depends on my mood.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So if I was willing to share, if it was perhaps yeah, it depends on the person maybe asking and how they asked. Sometimes I'd be more than happy just to say, oh yeah, my mum's from Vietnam and dad's Australian, and they'll be like, oh, that's not what we thought. You don't look like that, or whatever, and might just start a conversation.
Yes.
Other times, if I felt cheeky, I'd just say I'm from Australia.
Beautiful. Which you are. I mean, that's exactly the truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and when did your family move up to Canberra?
Before I was born, so they didn't stay in Tassie for very long. They came
Mhm.
across since 1975, and probably a few years later they came up to Canberra. I
Okay.
was actually almost a Queensland baby
Oh,
because they were looking for a house in Canberra, and they had dogs and kept getting refused. And there was like one last house, and they're like, if this one doesn't work out, we're going to Queensland. So I could have been one of your neighbours, Joe.
hey, that's a big difference, isn't it? Canberra, Queensland.
And I love the beach. I kind of wish they had gone, but anyway.
That's gorgeous. So tell me about your high school years, Ames. I know you said that you spent a year in Japan on exchange. So what effect did that have on you?
Huge, actually. I was very shy and very quiet until then. That was kind of what pushed me out of my shell and made me find my independence. The reason I went is because my mum actually went on exchange from Vietnam to America when she was 18.
Uh-huh.
And she found it to be a life-changing experience, and so she really recommended it to me. And so I happened to be studying Japanese, so I chose Japan and off I went. And it was in a program where it was at the stage where we didn't have like a lot of access to, there was no social media, we didn't have a lot of email access, and we weren't allowed to phone home. I think it was once a month I could talk to my parents,
Oh,
because they just wanted us to like have the full experience. So it was good. I got thrown in and I loved it. It really changed
gee.
me.
And have you got, and
Yeah.
well, in what way did it change you? Because you say you're quite introverted by nature. Did it push you out of your boundaries so you were less introverted?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of just helped me to find my voice and who really was lying underneath all of this kind of I think until then I was just a bit more in the background and was just who I was expected to be.
Yeah.
Whereas when I had this whole kind of fresh start, no one knew who I was. I could just be whoever I wanted to be. And that's, I think, when you started to see me, I'm happy, I'm relaxed, I'm easygoing, I'm always up for an adventure. Um, I do have Vietnamese. I don't know how well known this is, but Vietnamese are quite passionate, very strong, and can be fiery when it comes to what we believe in. So I've got a
Yeah.
bit of that as well.
Really? What a great mix.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
I think
just
that started to come up.
don't poke the nest too much because you might be.
Exactly. So you won't see that unless I'm either provoked or I'm very comfortable with you, but it's there. So
Oh, brilliant. Now, is that what your mum found as well when she went on exchange? Like you said that she went on there and found it really useful, but did that bring out her personality more as well?
I think so. I think she had a lot of responsibility with her family when she was in Vietnam. So her father passed away when she was very young, and she's the oldest of four kids.
Mm.
So she kind of had to take on a lot of responsibility in the family. And I think when she went, she also found that independence and a bit of freedom to be who she was. So yeah, I think we probably share a lot in that experience.
Oh, that's lovely. And was she proud? Well, I'm just thinking your mum, because it was, you're talking about your mum and her influence in the decision. When you came back to Australia, did that make her really happy to see you like that?
I think so, yeah. I have to ask her actually. I don't know if we've had a conversation about it, but I think so. I think she could see that what a great experience it was. And it was a setup where I was living with a family for a year. And my mum and my host mum have formed a relationship, and they've come out to visit, and they came out for my wedding, and I've been over for my host siblings' weddings, and we still keep in touch to this day. So it wasn't just me, but it's the whole family that kind of formed a connection. So it was really lovely.
Oh, that's so special,
Yeah.
and special to maintain all of that. Beautiful. Oh.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
So what were your dreams and your aspirations then, Ames, when you finished high school? What did you study? And I'm dying to hear all about this.
I always just wanted to live overseas. I just wanted to live in lots of different countries. And so again, going back to my mum, she's clearly had a big influence on my life. But all of her family after the war ended up in America, and she was the only one that ended up in Australia. So every few years as I was growing up, we would go on a trip somewhere and we'd meet her family somewhere in the world. And so through that experience, I gained the travel bug. And I just love going overseas. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to live in lots of different countries. So, and it's worked out that way, which is nice.
It has. So what did you study at university that then enabled you to be able to do that sort of in I suppose your young adulthood?
Well, coming back from my exchange in Japan, I went into uni a couple of years after that, and I studied Asian studies, specialising in Japanese. Through that degree, I was able to go back to Japan and live there for another year. And then I came back and I did my master's in international affairs, and that's where I finally worked out what it was. There was one particular class that was on international humanitarian aid, and as soon as I sat in that class, it just clicked, and I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, I've got goosebumps just hearing that. So where did that where was the path then for you once you finished your master's? Where did you go, and tell us about some of those experiences?
Straight after my master's, I applied for, it was called the Youth Ambassador Program. I'm not sure if it's still active or not, but it was basically a government sponsored program where you could go out and work in different organizations around the world in development. So I went to work for UNDP in Sri Lanka, up in the northern parts of Sri Lanka, and I worked there for a year on a development program.
Wow. Eye-opening?
Oh yeah. It sure was. In the best way. Like I love being pushed out of my comfort zone and just kind of working out how to live and how to connect with people and try to learn the language and experience the new foods. Like I'd walk down the streets to little vegetable stalls and I'd say, what's that and how do I cook it? And pretty much every time they'd say a little bit of oil, a little bit of chili, you know.
Oil and chili, and you can eat anything.
Yeah.
So how did you meet your husband? Because he's also lived a life of a lot of travel and living in different countries.
We actually met on the first day of my master's course. So it was one of those situations where you're in a big kind of lecture theatre, and we all had to go around and talk a little bit about our experience. And he had just come back from living for 2 years in Japan. And I had talked about having experience in Japan, and both of our ears pricked up. And apparently that day he said to his friend that I was the girl he was going to marry.
Oh,
so.
I was about to. Yeah. I was waiting for you to say, this crowded lecture hall and our eyes locked, and there that was not far from the truth, though. That's amazing.
Not far. Yeah, we were friends for a few years because I had someone else in my life, but he would always save me a seat in class and lend me his notes if I didn't show up and all that stuff. So yeah,
he was a patient man.
Patience paid off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And his pathway and his career path has led you, and obviously you got married, and the family to move around. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the countries you've been? And obviously you can't talk a huge amount of what the work your husband does, but just briefly touch on what he does and where you've been.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So from our masters, I went into the UN and not-for-profit sector, and he went into government. So he's in foreign affairs, and he still is. He's from that day. And so when we eventually got together, years after we met, it was about 6 weeks before he was going on posting to Malaysia. And so he went off to Malaysia, and then about 8 weeks or 12 weeks or something after that, I went to Liberia. So we had this long-term phone relationship where we got to know each other really well.
Holy.
From other ends of the earth. And then it got to a stage where my contract was up for renewal in Liberia, and I loved it there. It was really incredible, but love won, and so I moved to Malaysia, and from there we've lived in a variety of places. Went to Malaysia, Solomon Islands, back here for a while, back to Japan, and then Fiji most recently.
Gosh, and now back in Australia again for a little bit longer.
That's right. Yeah.
And how was that? Like you obviously had to change your career and your career path. Was that hard for you after loving what you were doing?
Yeah, it was hard. I remember having a tough conversation with my husband about like what's going to happen. But I was able to move from development into more of a specialisation in humanitarian aid. And I worked as a consultant and also within a not-for-profit in Malaysia. And it meant that I was a bit more flexible with where I could be. And so it actually worked out fine. But I do remember having a conversation with him where it's like, I'm not going to give up, what I'm passionate about. There needs to be some way that we can work this out, where we can both find fulfillment in what we're doing.
Go Ames. Yeah, you don't want to give up your whole career, what you really enjoy doing, do you? Because that's such an important part of who you are.
Yeah, but it was also, he was important to me as well, and vice versa. So we needed to find a way to do it, and luckily we did.
It is a tricky balance, isn't it? Just tiptoeing through. How do we manage this, and how do we have these tough decisions and discussions? And well, it's obviously worked because you're still going from country to country.
That's right.
Yeah,
I do love that. We both love that.
And did that change your role then when you were working at the UN in Malaysia? When children came along, is that what sort of had to make another lot of decisions again?
Yeah, basically. So we were actually in Solomon Islands when I was pregnant with my first, but I'd always had a niggle in the back of my mind about wanting to do something creative. And I would always talk about it. And basically I was pregnant and I was about to have a break in my career anyway, because I wanted to take some time to be with Bub. And hubby just said, well, if not now, then when? Like, well, you've got a perfect chance. And so I was like, well, you know what? You're right. And so I thought I'd just try a creative business. And that was actually my first business, where I was making children's clothes.
Okay, so sewing was that always a passion for you?
I've sewn since before I can remember. My mum learnt when I was a child, and I kind of learnt a little bit by osmosis by watching her. She'd make me and my friends little matching frilly outfits and stuff like that. And I would experiment as a teenager, when you want your own style. And I kind of came and went with sewing, but I really dove into it when I had my first baby, and it was just something that was mine. It wasn't me as mum or anything like that. It was just part of my identity that belonged solely to me. And so I dived in deep then.
Oh, wow. And what did you do? Just go through that process with me then. Like, it was more than just sewing the outfits for your children and maybe some other kids.
Yeah, it was just like some time where I could get into a flow state and lose myself and feel productive and have something to show at the end of it as well. I remember Archie was 6 weeks old, and I made him this little outfit, a little vest and a little kind of what do you call it, those paperboy hats or whatever.
Yeah.
And we went we went to a wedding, and everyone was like, oh, it's amazing, you know, where do you buy it? And I was like, oh, I made it. Like, you should sell it. I was like, yeah, I should.
And that was a
And
catalyst for the business?
that was the catalyst for the first business, yeah.
Holy. And
Yeah.
how long did that last then?
It actually lasted until I had my second, so they're just over 2 years apart. But it is really labour intensive making clothes to sell them, especially custom made. So I knew that my time was about to get soaked up even more by this second baby, and so I thought I'll just take a little hiatus and just see what happens. And if I was honest, I probably knew that that was closing a business, but I just couldn't say it at that stage.
Yeah.
And that's when I pivoted into fabrics.
And obviously, do you want to talk about that? Because when you say fabrics, it's not the everyday fabrics that you might find, you know, when you go shopping for an outfit
No.
here. So, yeah, just take us down that path and how that sort of came to be part of what you're doing now.
Well, we were in Tokyo, so my second was born in Tokyo, and I went to this fabric fair because I've always loved fabric. So wherever we would travel in the world with my family, I'd always find a unique fabric and bring it home. That would be my souvenir. So I went to this independent designer fabric fair in Tokyo, and I was blown away as soon as I stepped in. Like, these fabrics were stunning, nothing like I'd ever seen before. And the artists who designed them and made them were right there selling their fabrics, so you could talk to them. And basically, I just started having conversations with them and telling them how much I love their fabrics. And they were saying that they would love to have their fabrics go out to the international market, but they either couldn't speak English or didn't have the time or didn't know how to work in the online space. And so that's when all the light bulbs went off, and I said, well, I can do that piece and help support these artists. And also, I love sparking creativity, so I could share these unique fabrics with other sewists around the world. So that's when this business started.
That's amazing. How many years ago is that, Ames, did you say?
Well, I remember Indy was in a carrier on my front when I was having these conversations. So I'd say it was probably about 6 years ago.
Huh. And there's not only the fabrics, you also have some of the patterns. So what I'm not a sewer, so can you explain? even though my mother sewed clothes for me, that was not something by osmosis I ever wanted to do. So
it's one of those things, you either love it or you don't. So.
I'm in the don't camp, sorry, but I'm always amazed with women who are, because it's definitely a talent. So tell me about the pattern side of things as well.
So it's actually, one side of my business is the fabrics. So I support these independent designers and I sell it to individual sewists, so garment sewists who want to make their own clothes.
Okay, so they are called, can I interrupt there? Just, they are people who sew are called sewists.
Yes, well, you can say sewer, but when you write it, it looks like sewer.
Sewer, yeah.
So
be a sewer. Okay, so a sewist makes a lot of sense now.
And also sewing an artist, it kind of comes together in a beautiful way.
Good. Yep, I can totally get now that you've explained it. Thank you. Right. Sorry, Ames, I interrupted your flow. I can't even remember what we were talking about. Oh, your patterns.
Yeah. So yes, the fabric side of my business. I also did a collaboration with a Finnish sewing magazine, and I brought out my first sewing pattern. So there is that. But the other main part of my business is a sewing community. So for me, it always comes back to connection. And I wanted to create a space where, like when I went to Japan for the first time and I could just be fully myself, I wanted a space for sewists where they could come and just be fully themselves. They don't have to be photo ready like you might want to be on social media. You just come. You've got other people that are also passionate about the same thing you are. You can share, you can ask your questions. And so I've now created a membership that's all about sewing, in addition to the fabric side of my business.
Oh, and so for people who sort of go, oh, that sounds good. Do I have to be in Canberra? Is that the case?
No, so it's all online. So it's really wonderful because
Oh,
you can, especially sewing can be a solitary practice,
yeah,
because you can go into your sewing room and go away and make your thing, and you don't have to talk to another soul if you don't want to. But
yeah.
it's so important to share these passions, and your joy that you get from these things is always magnified if you can do it in community. So it was really important for me to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So I've got members in South Africa, the UK, the
Oh,
US,
oh,
Australia.
amazing.
Um, yeah, it's really wonderful. And everyone brings a unique perspective, which is really nice. And
Yeah.
also, sewists that are new to the craft or have been doing it for decades. So it's a really lovely mix.
Oh, that'd be so rewarding. And do they have to use your fabrics, Ames? What's the goal
Mm,
of? Is it just a community
no,
of oh, okay.
yeah, just it's all about connecting with others. I provide a monthly class, so it's skill building, and we bring in guest speakers from the sewing community, which people really love hearing from, whether they're pattern designers or fabric designers or just other sewists, and hearing about their sewing journey. So it just kind of opens you up to other experiences and new perspectives. And it's just a place where people can come and ask their questions
Mm.
and know that they'll get answers. And yeah, so it's all of that stuff, but not tied to my fabrics at all or a location.
So when you wear some of the clothes that you with your fabrics and your designs, do people stop you and go, "Where did you get that from?"
Yeah, it's one of, like, as a sewist, that's our favorite thing when someone says, "Where did you get that?" You go, "Well, thank you, I made it."
Yes. Have you ever thought of having
It's
your own line as well, or is that
a
just too big of a enterprise to contend with at this point in time with the kids?
Probably at this point in time, it'd be too much. I really just am focused on my membership in the fabrics, but in future, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be fun. I would really actually enjoy that. I'd love to also design my own fabrics to put them into a clothing line. I think that would be really cool.
It would. And so some of the
Mm.
Japanese patterns that you have, like again, because I don't understand sewing and that whole world, do the Japanese have a completely different style to, say, the rest of the world when it comes to patterns?
Yeah, so Japanese sewing books are a real thing in the sewing community because there is a very distinct aesthetic that's kind of minimalist, easy to wear, comfortable, really interesting silhouettes and details. And so yeah, it is quite distinct. And then if you introduce these fabrics, these indie fabrics, they're usually quite vibrant with really interesting designs and prints. So if you put those two together, it can be really impactful.
So then
Yeah.
you've got that's what you when you said indie, that's of course your business is called Indy Bindy Fabric. So where's the Bindy side? Just because it rhymed, or is that a connection as well?
Well, it's actually, so the indie fabrics because they're the independent designers, but the store was actually, because the idea for the store was born around the same time as my second son. His name is Indy. And so my first son would always call him Indy Bindy. That was just his nickname. And
Oh,
so it just felt natural to name my store
yeah.
after my son.
Yeah, again, makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
you're a very practical woman. Has all of this, because you've got, and you mentioned you're quite introverted by nature. How has having your first business and now this second business where it's growing and growing, how is that melding with your more introverted personality? Has it brought you out more again?
I think, well, I still get my energy, I think, from that quiet time, whether it's me in my sewing room, doing something, my sewing cave. But I love connecting with people that share that same passion or that I'm really comfortable with. So same like with you, Joe, or with my close circle of friends or inside my membership, it's all people that I know and love. So um, I think that kind of introvertedness doesn't necessarily come out then. That's when
Mm.
I feel like truly in flow and just who I am. But then I go away and I get my energy back when I'm sewing or if I'm sitting down with a book quietly or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And another thing that I've learned about you this year, which blows my mind, Ames, because you are an incredible woman, is like that whole aspect of being fit is really important to you, but it comes in a different package that you don't expect, because, and people will see on the podcast art when they have a look at the show, that, and on social media, that you are, a beautiful, glowing woman that you don't expect to be, a 4th level black belt martial artist. That just amazes me. And this woman, I've seen this woman can do push-ups on her knuckles. Like, just amazing. So can you tell me about how you got into this world of martial arts? And you're still very active, because you went to Japan this year as well, with regards to your martial arts. Talk about that side of your life, because that's phenomenal.
Well, I think that's, a channel for that fieriness that I was talking about earlier. It's got to go somewhere.
Beat the crap out of somebody in a martial arts competition. Well done,
That's
eh?
right. It's a bit of a funny story, actually. It started when I first went to Japan as a 15-year-old, and I'd heard that all exchange students gain weight. And so I was like, all right, I need to do something. And when you're in a local Japanese high school, you have to do some kind of club after school. It's mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
But there's any kind of club you can imagine, whether it's riding or debating or track and field or anything. I thought, oh, track and field, that'll be perfect. And so I tried to sign up for that, but I was the first exchange student that this school had ever had. And so they were concerned that the starting gun would affect my hearing. So they said that I wasn't allowed to do that. And so then I thought,
all
okay,
the other
I'll do
children
judo.
deaf, but not you.
I know. So I thought, oh no, judo, that's sporty, it's Japanese. And then they said, no, that's only for boys, you can't do that. And then they suggested tea ceremony or flower arranging. Oh. And I thought, that's not going to help me to sit around drinking tea and eating cake. And so then I thought, okay, how about karate? And there were 2 other girls from my year that were joining as well. And so they finally relented, and I fell in love with it. I just, every day after school, so 5 days a week, we'd go to training, and also on Saturdays would come in especially for karate. And it was my little community, and it was an outlet, and I've just done it ever since. So almost 30 years.
30. And I know in martial arts, I know martial arts there are so many different types of and variations of. Was it hard to find what you were learning in Japan back in Australia when you came back home?
I was actually just really fortunate that there was the same style here in Canberra, and it was a fantastic club. And I think, it doesn't really matter what style you choose if anyone's thinking about joining a martial art. What it really matters to me anyway is the instructor and the feel of the club. So that's what will kind of set the tone for everything else. And so I was fortunate that I found a really good one, and I've continued with them ever since, while I'm in Australia. And then I'm lucky that it's part of a bigger organization that they've got clubs overseas too. So when I'm in Japan, I train with the same organization, but I have an incredible instructor there. It's one of my favorite things about being in Japan. It's this 74 this year, he's turning, year-old 9th level black belt that I get to train one-on-one with.
Wow.
And he just runs circles around me. He's so much stronger and fitter and faster, and it's really inspiring.
It would be inspiring. So where do you take your practice now? Like, do you go or are you happy to stay where you are?
So I got my 4th level, I think it might have been last year. So technically, I think you're supposed to wait 5 years before you can try for your 5th.
Yep.
And then another 6 years before you go for your 6th. But I had a bit of a break where I was training for 10 years when I was in Solomon Islands and Malaysia, where I was kind of doing self-training. Mm-hmm. So I should be further along than I am. I just I wasn't in the system in those years, so I didn't get to grade. So I may be able to grade for my 5th the year after next.
Wow.
So,
that's amazing if you did. So it's not only keeps you physically fit, it's also you know, the mental and the spiritual side of the practice as well that keeps you fit in that area. Can you talk about how that's made a difference for you?
Yeah, well, it's actually the thing I love most about it, and it's the same with karate. It's the same with sewing. The same with life. I think it's just one of those things that's an ongoing journey. It doesn't end. There's always somewhere you can go, somewhere you can up level if you want to. It's a real personal challenge. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. And it's a reminder often that you can do hard things. And when you do those things and you level up, there's still more to go. So
Yeah.
I enjoy that journey a lot.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor for what life is all about, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
have you noticed that within yourself, you know, apart from doing your martial arts, having and creating a business, like they're two huge things. Are you finding your confidence growing more and more as you're getting older?
Definitely. Yeah. I think all of those things contribute, and probably perhaps it's just a natural part of life as well, that we start to shed expectations and what we think people want us to just be who we are and embrace that and kind of step into that power. And I think you have to do that as a business owner, but also sewing has really helped me a lot because it's a way that I can express myself without saying a single word. I'm not hindered by, you know, the clothes that I see in shops or any of that stuff. It's just, I think any creative outlet can really help you to kind of touch base with who you are.
Yeah.
And that's definitely been true for me.
Oh, well, you're a great advertisement for your business.
Thank
Because you
you.
practice what you preach. I mean, you really do, like, as in everything that you've just said then, that's what you stand for, and that's what's sort of shining. Yeah.
Oh,
Well
great.
done. Well done. Because so many people miss that whole thing. Well, you've got so much life ahead of you and in front of you. What are you really looking forward to in the future?
Just continuing the journey really, and seeing where it takes me, because I know there, like you said, there is so much ahead, and I think it's so hard to picture, and I don't think it's necessarily healthy to have a set idea of what it's going to be. I think it's good to dream and have big dreams, but not to be too fixed on them. So that's kind of how I've approached life anyway, is I tend to go with the flow. Um, and so I'm just excited for where I'm going to end up in 10, 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's that
Yeah.
person going to be?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm looking forward to seeing who that person is going to be. Who are your current role models? Obviously, your mum is up there because you spoke so highly of your mum and her experiences and the impact she's had on your life. Who else are role models that you've got that you look up to, maybe in the sewing world or the art world or just in general?
Yeah. I think there's my karate instructor in Japan is definitely one of them. He's just dedicated his life to his craft, and he's so welcoming and open, and he's all about sharing his knowledge. And he's just so fit, right? And that's what I want to be. I want to be fit and healthy.
Be like him when I grow up.
In the sewing world, there's quite a few in the online sewing community that I really admire. One of them, she's Brisbane based actually. Her name's Suching, and she, like me, is a lover of color and print, and she is just 100% herself. She embraces all of her quirk, and I just love it. Yeah.
So how can people connect with you, Ames? Like, what's the best path if they're listening and they go, oh, I want to see who this woman is and learn more about her and her work?
I'm most active on Instagram, and you can find me at Indy Bindy Fabrics, which is INDYBINDY Fabrics. And my website is the same. It's indybindy.com.au if you want to check out all of the fabrics. And I'll give you a link for the society as well if people are interested in joining the membership.
Pop those all in the show notes for people to click on afterwards. And again, go on Insta to see some of Ames' beautiful work. So Ames, what messages or words of advice would you like to give other women who are listening?
I think my biggest thing is just to go ahead and play. Just enjoy yourself. Let go of any self-imposed boundaries that might have come about from other areas of your life, and just play and have fun and see what happens.
Yeah, that's great advice. And our final wrap-up question, Ames, if you could look into the future, what do you hope 80-year-old Ames will say about current day Ames?
I hope that she would say that she's grateful that I soaked up as much life as I could right now, but I also held her in my heart and kept her in mind.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Well, you are a gorgeous woman inside and out, Ames, and I hope to stay connected with you for a lot longer. Thanks for your time today and for sharing your life so openly with us today. You're an inspiration.
Thank you so much, Jo. I really love this.
All right. Bye-bye, Dub. Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. To keep spreading these empowering messages, please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.